I totally agree with the people that are suggesting that we're seeing similarities between 2008 and the collapse in 2000. And the only thing I would point out is now the system is infinitely more stretched. I mean, since 2008, they've added the better part of $75 to $100 trillion worth of debt in the system, making it ever more levered than it was then, and it almost collapsed. So if they lose control, when they lose control of it this time, it's going to be chaotic.
Are you tired of overpaying for your gold, silver, and platinum bullion coins and bars? Then visit sdbullion.com today. SD Bullion was recently named the 177th fastest growing company in the United States by Inc. magazine. This is because they offer the absolute lowest prices in the industry and follow up with over-the-top customer service. So what are you waiting for? Go to sdbullion.com today and join more than 60,000 happy investors that save money on every precious metals purchase they make.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with silverdoctors.com, and back with us today a very special guest, John Embry, the Senior Advisor at Sprott, Inc. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to chat with Silver Doctors.
All right. For the last few weeks, we've seen the dollar rally. Now, what's really interesting about this is that we've still seen precious metals hold up pretty well. What is your perspective on why that is?
Well, quite frankly, Elijah, if the dollar is the world's strongest currency, you can't own enough gold and silver if you start looking into the fundamentals underlying the dollar. And if the dollar is strong, it says volumes about how terrible the rest of the world's currencies are. So, I mean, I just think this is prelude to a major move in gold and silver, and I think we're getting closer.
Do you have any price targets on gold and silver? I think you were on King World News and you were saying possibly $300 an ounce for silver.
Well, I think basically, I believe very simply that when you have a bull market in the precious metals, the gold-silver ratio drops to more historical lows, which are in the 15 to 20 to 1, rather than the current 80 to 1. So if you say that the gold price can go to 3,000, just to pick a number, and I think that's a low number, actually. But if that was your target, and I think in that environment, the gold-silver ratio would drop from 80 to 20, well, you get 4 times as big a move in silver, and that puts a big number on silver.
Definitely. And what kind of target do you see for gold?
Well, I think 3,000 is minimum in in a reasonable time frame, which is the next couple of years. But I mean, if my very negative views in our fiat currency system are realized, who knows what it'll be priced at? Because it's not the price of gold that's changing, it's the value of the currencies in which it's denominated. And to the central bankers' credit, they've maintained a lock on gold and silver prices, and most people don't realize the extent to which how vulnerable the fiat currency system is and how cheap gold and silver are. They will figure this out in the not too distant future.
Now, last time we had you on, we were talking about Bitcoin, and right about that time, we saw a peak in Bitcoin at $19,000 or $20,000. Since then, it's declined more than 50%. It went around 6,000 something. What is you back then you were saying, Bitcoin looks like a bubble, and boy, were you right. I mean, it seems like, the bubble popped, but what is your assessment of where we are for Bitcoin right now?
That's a really difficult question, Elijah. Like, I read all sorts of stuff on both sides of the equation. I saw Charlie Munger was out just savaging it yesterday. And I see other equally as bright guys thinking it's going to be, the second coming. But I honestly have some difficulty with these cryptocurrencies in the sense that they can be proliferate. I mean, Bitcoin is just one of any number of them. And I think the one that will ultimately win, if you want to go into cryptocurrencies, is one that's going to be gold-backed, where you have a gold blockchain. So that would be my only strong observation. I don't know where the other ones are going to trade, but I think a gold blockchain backing a cryptocurrency will be a massive winner.
Now, moving our focus to the stock market, over the last couple of years, we've seen about a tripling of the oil price from $26 in February 2016 to now $71 just recently. What is your perspective on this and how this could impact the stock market?
Well, I mean, the overall stock market is, I think I've made the point many times, is grotesquely overvalued. And I've been in the business 55 years, and this is the most ludicrous valuation I've ever seen on the stock market. And I mean, it attests more to the fact that, there's been an unlimited supply of money coming out of the central banks, and but the use of machines and algorithms and everything, you can basically control the price of markets for an extended period of time. And I think that's exactly what's been going on. But I would be extraordinarily careful with the stock market here. And if oil, which is an indicator, I think, of inflation, and these things continue to rise, and I believe they will, I think the ultimate impact on the stock market could be quite negative. But, I'm much more bearish in the bond market than I am in the stock market, because in many instances, the stock market represents real assets. The bond market is a promise to pay from bankrupt debtors, and the other alternative, it probably is that they fight off that. You're going to have a hyperinflation. So under no condition can I see bonds being a good long-term investment.
Now, moving to viewers' questions, this question is about the stock market. They ask, John Embry, will this stock market crash be like the 1929 crash, and will it cause a second Great Depression?
Oh, without question. I mean, I think the central banks will fight this to the end. And the fact is that they'll put it off, but only at the price of a hyperinflation, which in my opinion is worse. But ultimately, after this is all has to be cleaned up, it will make the 30s will look like a picnic compared to what's coming in the next 20 years.
Now, this viewer is wanting to know about if they have current debt, for example, let's say credit card debt or other debt that they hold. Would you suggest possibly paying off that debt if the only way they can do that is selling their cryptocurrencies or selling their precious metals or hard assets? Is that a good idea to get debt free, or should they maybe keep the debt and the precious metals?
That's an interesting question, because I believe that the risk you've got in your debt will be more than offset by how much your precious metals would go up. I might be inclined to sell my cryptocurrencies if I had them against to pay off a debt position. I would be disinclined to sell my gold and silver at these levels.
Now, this viewer is wanting to know about the federal funds rate. And recently we just saw the Fed, this was last Wednesday, they were saying that they aren't going to raise interest rates, but kind of hinting that interest rate hike might come soon. What do you think the maximum of the Fed funds rate could be before the system imploded?
Well, I don't think they could raise it more than a couple of 100 basis points. I think they're using moral suasion. They're talking about 2, 3, 4 rate hikes and what have you, knowing full well how vulnerable the system is. They're just trying to keep things moving forward by saying there's going to be rate hikes. I'll believe it when I see it, because if they intentionally raise rates by a significant proportion, and they're way too low now, I mean, the system will implode, because the amount of debt at all levels, not just consumer, government, but also at corporate levels, is staggering. And I don't even take into account these unbelievable unfunded liabilities in the U.S. I mean, it's just shocking. And the only reason this whole system, including not just the United States, globally has been kept afloat, has been by interest rates which are preposterous. I mean, why anybody on earth would accept a negative interest rate on a sovereign debt from Europe is beyond my comprehension. These guys are bankrupt. And this will be seen if in the history books as one of the stupidest times. It'll make the tulip mania looking clever.
Now, some of the guests I've had on recently are saying that the things happening right now are very similar to what happened in 2008 and before the dot-com crisis. Now, one of the things is that we're seeing like a flattening yield curve. What is your perspective on that?
I totally agree with the people that are suggesting that we're seeing similarities between 2008 and the collapse in 2000. And the only thing I would point out is now the system is infinitely more stretched. I mean, since 2008, they've added the better part of $75 to $100 trillion worth of debt in the system, making it ever more levered than it was then, and it almost collapsed. So if they lose control, not if, when they lose control of it this time, it's going to be chaotic. And I don't think you can be positioned in hard assets sufficiently. I mean, everything else, paper assets, are going to be in distinct difficulty.
Now, I know last time we had you on, you were saying that, it seems like the dollar is on death throes. If we see a dollar collapse, what do you see emerging? Do you see us going back to a gold standard?
I think you'll see some sort of an international currency that will probably, for confidence sake, have to be backed by something like gold. And it'll be, the U.S. dollar will be part of this international SDR or whatever. But I mean, the U.S. dollar's position as the world's reserve currency, which has given Americans an astounding advantage over the last 70 plus years, is coming to an end. And I think it will affect living standards in North America to degrees which I hate to even contemplate.
Now, for those holding gold, then, do you think they're positioning themselves really well? If we do end up going on some sort of gold standard, gold would have to be revalued like a lot higher, correct?
Unquestionably. And I think the Chinese and the Russians and the many entities in the Far East who have been accumulating gold relentlessly will ultimately trigger a reset of the price. And to those people that own gold, I think it'll be an enormous boon wherever you live. And if you're basically in paper assets and own no hard assets, your financial position will be destroyed.
Last thing before we let you go, big news this week, the U.S. exited the Iran nuclear deal. Trump said no more. How do you think this will impact geopolitical tensions?
Well, I'm very concerned about geopolitical. It's not just, the Trump and Iran. I mean, it's all over the place. You've got Erdogan in Turkey, and you've got all sorts of people in positions of power today that seem to be bent on, creating chaos. I'm deeply concerned about the geopolitical situation. My only observation would be that nuclear arsenals are so enormous in different hands that even in my worst nightmare, I can't imagine a nuclear conflict emerging, because I don't think the world would survive. So I think we're just going to go see more of this sort of jousting back and forth, and eventually, hopefully, we'll get some settlement. But the Middle East is a real powder keg now, and I have no idea how that's going to work out.
I guess just another reason to, protect yourself with precious metals.
Without question. I think that so far geopolitical developments have had no positive impact on precious metals. But I think ultimately they will have a major positive impact. And I think it's just a matter of patience. And it's been very hard to be patient, because basically you've seen people making all sorts of money in other areas, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrencies, etc. And people are being driven out of their precious metals. And I think this is a very negative development. I think people should just be patient and wait for the inevitable.
All right. Well, John Embry, thank you so much for joining us today. Did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online? Yeah,
you can find me online at Sprott Inc. And more importantly, I just think my last observation would be you can't be too careful here. This is a very, very dangerous financial situation.
Definitely. Well, John Embry, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'll talk to you anytime.